Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're going to start out tonight with an opening with Supervisor Doss Williams.
I just want to welcome all of you here and thank the Montecito Association for getting out the word on the event. And just remind folks, in case you haven't been here before, restrooms are out on the left, and there's a little watering station around back. Tonight, I think, is going to be welcome news. If we are to process what the community's been through and we're to make some light out of this darkness, we have to continuously learn as we go. And there are several things tonight that I hope will be evidence that our first responders in the county are learning, fine-tuning our work. Tonight you'll have from the MIC, the meteorologist in charge, you're going to see the revision of our rain threshold. You're going to see a simpler evacuation protocol, and you'll have detailed all the different ways that we and law enforcement will use to try to get a hold of you. And so I hope this information is useful. We want some feedback on it, so feel free to either stay and comment or email us afterwards in the coming days. So welcome. It's great to see you all here. An honor to represent you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doss. So as I look out in the crowd, I see we have our Montecito Fire Chief, Chief Hickman. Raise your hand over there with us tonight. We have Chief Greg Fish here with us tonight as well. Harp Sullivan. We have the Undersheriff, Saul Linver, here as well. And I want to make sure that we have a special shout out thank you to the Montecito Association for helping us through this. And the very gracious host, the Montecito Union School District. Thank you for letting us use this tonight. Well, it's nice to see so many familiar faces here tonight. We have a full agenda. And the purpose of this meeting is really to have a conversation with you before the winter season. And as Doss Williams said, we're here to share new evacuation methods. We're going to talk about some new protocols. You're going to hear from our team, our partners, local experts. And at the end of the day, we really want to hear your questions and your concerns. You have been guiding us and helping us understand where we need to focus our information, our resources, on how to best serve you. Amid all of our recovery efforts, we've spent a lot of time working on storm readiness over the last 9 months. And like many communities across the state, we are bracing ourselves for another post-fire winter season. I can tell you that several communities across the state that have experienced recent catastrophic wildfires in their communities have learned from us and our work together as a whole community. Efforts that started long before the Thomas Fire, as your Montecito Fire Department worked diligently on fuel treatments and collaborations that were instrumental in our fight against the Thomas Fire. And your Flood Control District is another example of Herculean efforts to make sure those debris basins and channels were as prepared as they could be. And I know that the most important and effective strategy that we have is to continue to work together as a whole community to keep our friends and loved ones safe this winter season. When I say whole community, I really mean our neighbors, the volunteers, our friends in the media that help us get the information out, our scientists that are working to analyze our watersheds and provide us with their very best work so that we can make good decisions. All of our nonprofits, and I see Abe in the back, thank you for being here, that have organized around protecting us, counseling us, and putting their neighbors ahead of themselves. And also our elected community members who are continually going to bat for us, bringing the much needed awareness, funding, and actual solutions to the problems that we have identified in our community. And these solutions are helping across the state. It is not by accident that we are here before you this week on National Flood Preparedness Week, which has special significance for us, and that we are here having our conversations before the winter season. Our risk is still here, and it will be here for another 2 to 5 years. We know that in order to have a debris flow, that it takes a combination of 3 things. And unfortunately, we have 2 of the 3 things needed to have another debris flow. We have had these steep slopes here behind us for a long time. And now we have fire-scarred watersheds above our community. The missing 3rd factor is a storm event with enough intensity to move debris or enough rainfall for flooding. And we have one of the very best subject matter experts here tonight to talk to you about that. As a whole community, we're going to have a proactive approach to this winter season. We're going to continue to plan, refine our plans, communicate our plans, listen to you, and if needed, respond ready and united to any significant rain events or any other hazards that come our way. So Nancy, if we can get the next couple slides there. Keep going. So we have 2 meetings set up, the one you're here tonight or you're watching live at home, tonight in Montecito, and Monday night, October 28th in Carpinteria. We're filming both sessions and translating both meetings. Tonight, our discussion items include the following topics: community outreach. We have the National Weather Service Oxnard support team here to talk about rain thresholds. We have some new information on our risk maps. We have a new Ready, Set, Go preparedness initiative that Director Lewin is going to talk to us about. We have an evacuation advisory and warning discussion. And we have the County Educational Office here with us tonight. He's going to talk a little bit about planning for schools and talk a little bit about the different kinds of storms as well. Over the last 9 months, we've been focused on a series of community meetings, meetings with school officials, meetings with all of our allied agencies and our partner agencies across different jurisdictions, with the utilities that have been going up around us. We've been talking to our scientists and getting the very best information to help make decisions. We've had meetings with the media and state and federal presence at our press conferences, and also working closely with all of our wonderful volunteer organizations throughout the county. And next, I'm going to start us off by introducing Mark Jackson. He's a meteorologist in charge here with the National Weather Service in Oxnard.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks everybody for being here tonight, taking time out of your afternoon and your evening to be here to listen to us, and thanks to the county for having me here and be trusted partners into the into the community Montecito. So I'm the meteorologist in charge with the National Weather Service located in Oxnard. We cover Los Angeles up to San Luis Obispo County. We have forecasters, morning coordination meteorologist Eric Bolt. If you're not familiar with him, he reaches out to the community. We work very closely with the county on their preparedness system. And what I want to talk to you about today is a little bit about the warning system first, and then go over what it means this fall or this fall and winter when it comes to what kind of rainfall rates might produce debris flows. So next slide, please. See, go back. There we go. Okay. So the way the system has worked, and we've been in a partnership with the United States Geological Survey since the winter of 2005, 2006. They have looked historically over many, many years in Southern California at the number of times that a debris flow has occurred out of a post-wildfire burn area and what kind of rainfall has occurred that produced that debris flow. And this covers not just the Santa Barbara South Coast and the mountains behind us, but also all the way down into San Diego's area. And what they do then is the rates that they have examined go all the way down from 5 minutes, so how much occurs in 5 minutes, all the way up to 12 hours. And what we have learned is that it's the high-intensity, short-duration rainfall rates that are most likely to produce debris flow. So even though they have thresholds all the way out to 12 hours, typically what we've seen, it's that rainfall that occurs in a shorter amount of time. And it's not about the storm total. And as a good example, we've had situations in which we have a nice, gentle, long, multiple-day rain that we need. We need the rain. We need the rain for that vegetation to grow back. And the drainage systems can handle that kind of rain. The debris basins can handle that kind of rain. Everything handles it. There's no impact to life and property. But then it's the rainfall rate. It's how fast it falls. And I have a flyer back there, a 2-page handout in the table in the back that shows you the science of debris flows. There's a picture on there of water beating up on soil. And so what happens is that after that fire, all the saps, everything from the trees gets sucked into that soil, it becomes hydrophobic, and water literally beads off of that soil. So that picture is a very dramatic demonstration of what happens when you get a lot of rainfall on that soil. You want it to soak in, it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it comes down the hill, down the slope, and takes with it any loose dirt, any loose soil, any loose trees, any loose rocks with it. So that's what's happening now. So we use this guidance, this rainfall rate guidance, and I'll show you a table of an example. We use it as guidance for when we see the potential for a possible debris flow. And that can come all the way out 7 days in advance when we see what the storm looks like, and using what we know and our knowledge and meteorology and experience. We have a tremendous amount of experience in this forecast office. I've had very few new hires in my office. I don't know if it's because I'm an easy manager, but we have a lot of Southern California experience that really know what they're doing. And we will use that to help determine then as we get closer to determine whether we issue watches and warnings. I'll go over what those mean in a second. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the thresholds become a little higher as the burn scar ages, and the reason for that is because as over time, when you get just enough rainfall in that burn area, you start getting regrowth. So you start getting some vegetation that's coming back. The larger trees that were burned, the big root systems, those take a much longer time, but at least you're starting to get some vegetation back that's going to help hold that soil down. So what happens is after that first year, and even though the Thomas Fire was less than a year ago, we're still treating it as it's been a year. So there has been some regrowth back, not as much as we'd like to see. There's been some. They've been up there. Experts have been up there to look at and survey the area. And we've had several meetings to determine what to do with the rainfall rates. So what also happens is when you see those rainfall rates, the rates that are just above those thresholds, they typically produce movement of debris that can be handled by the drainage systems and the flood control systems. But it's when you get these rates that are 2 to 3 times higher of what those thresholds are, that's when we have problems with the system, when you get those tremendously heavy rainfall. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So what we see here is if you look on the left-hand side, these are the rates. So this is 15, 30, all the way out to 12 hours. Now, we have 2 different rates that we're using, one for the Thomas burn scar, the other for the Whittier. So the Thomas burn scar, these are the rates that we're going to use, and those cells that are highlighted in blue, those are the ones that we really want to try to be aware of. When we see rainfall rates that are really looking to be even higher than those rainfalls in 15 minutes, and I'll go down to 5 minutes. 5 minutes isn't on here, but we're lucky enough that the county has a tremendous amount of rainfall gauges throughout the county and also now out in the Channel Islands. So as we see storms that are coming in off the ocean, we can actually see what kind of rainfall rates are occurring out offshore and over the islands to be able to have some heads up. And then as you get all the way out, then you can see that it gets a little bit higher. But it's those areas, those cells, those rows that are in blue that we really have to pay attention to. Next slide, please. So if you just take a second here to absorb this, what the county has done is gone back to look at 3 particular rain gauge sites, Cold Springs, Dalton Tunnel, and San Marcos Pass. And in that second column is the number of years that we have data for those sites. And then what this shows is the percent of years that rainfall intensities have been exceeded. So as an example, that half an inch per hour, or half an inch per hour, every one of those 40 years for Cold Springs debris basin, there has been at least one time in which the rainfall was at least a half an inch an hour, okay? But as you go across, and as you add now, if you now tighten things up and a little higher rainfall rate that's required, so 0.8 of an inch per hour, about half of those years, half of those 40 years, but there's been at least one instance where the rainfall rate was that amount or more, and then so on and so forth over that, and then it's the 1 inch. The point here is that as you start making it a little more difficult with a little bit heavier rain, now you start seeing a little fewer occurrences of that rainfall rate being recorded. It's not to let your guard down, but it is to let you know that on a positive note, that as the burn scar ages and as you start having to raise those rainfall rates, now there may be situations in which in times before, maybe there would have been evacuations, but in this time, since it takes heavier rain, now there may not be an evacuation. Or the same goes for a warning. We wouldn't warn for a rainfall rate that we had last year versus one this year. Okay. So next slide, please, and just a few points about mud and debris flows. They are very difficult to predict. It really is a very early science. It can be very difficult enough to really predict how much rain is going to fall. Now you've complicated matters by now trying to predict or forecast whether any debris comes down that hillside. So there's a lot of factors that, there are a lot of experts that continue to look at this. The U.S. Geological Survey continues to look at this issue, continue to conduct research. And so there's a lot of difficult things that the clarity of where we might even see any rainfall or any debris flows might not even come to focus until maybe the day before or even an hour before. It's very difficult. So we as leaders have a very difficult time, even as we go out to 3 or 4 days, to be able to say the if, when, and where. And that's what we need to know. And so just kind of bear with us that we try to do the best we can to at least be able to communicate what the potential might be. And as we get closer to the time, then we start gaining more focus. So for some storms, the confidence can be very high. I know from experience out here in Southern California, especially in the winter, when we have these strong winter storms that start coming down the Central Coast, that we have fairly high confidence on the timing. We have fairly high confidence that with a lot of moisture with these storms, if you've heard of the Pineapple Express, so when we have storms that have what's called a Pineapple Express, the new term now, atmospheric river, that atmospheric river is pulling in all that moisture from the Pacific. So that's one of the main ingredients to get all that rain. And so luckily, we've got the kind of satellite data we have at our disposal now that we can see these kind of things. So, but again, even then, depending on the path and then the slope, the debris flows can move very fast. And that's another thing that we have to be aware of. We do have a very steep slope behind us. And that's something to always be aware of. So one of the main things to share with you is to make sure, follow the instructions of the local officials. There is a lot of work, a lot of planning that goes on. The Weather Service is involved in that as we head into a storm. And please, please, please follow the instructions of local officials. One other note then is when it comes to the anticipation of how many debris flows we might have, ignore seasonal outlooks. I intentionally left any sort of mention of El Nino on here. We have a weak El Nino. It might be moderate. We don't know. But the point is it only takes one storm to create a world of problems. One storm. It does not take a strong El Nino season like we had in 97, 98, or 83. It does not take that kind of season. All it takes is one strong storm. And then finally, on my last slide here, I want to just, if we go, I'm going to give you next bullet, not next slide, but next bullet. I'm going to give you just real quickly how we kind of progress and how we work with the partners here and as we approach a possible storm system that we see might have the potential for debris flows. So 4 to 7 days prior, we're messaging the potential. We see a strong storm. We see the potential for rainfall rates that might exceed a certain amount. We have emails that kind of break down what the impacts might be. We break down what our confidence might be. So we might say that we have a high confidence in the timing, but we have a moderate confidence in the locations. So especially with these atmospheric rivers, depends on where that axis lines up. It might be a little farther north, it might be over us, so that's also another variable. We're not quite sure as we go a week out. We have direct communications with our partners. We have their cell phones. We're calling them. We're talking to them one-on-one. We have experience with them. There's a trusting relationship. They can sense any sort of urgency in the tone of our voice. We'll call them and have these direct communications. Those are one of the most valuable ways that we can talk with them. And then, next bullet, please. 1 to 3 days prior, now things are starting to get into a little better focus. We have numerical model data that is now giving us a few more details on what we might expect, okay? And so we might now, we'll continue with that messaging, but now maybe the county is now starting up their storm risk decision teams and their calls. So we're conferenced in on those calls, and what we'll do is we'll start the call with an operations briefing. We'll give everybody on the call a big picture of what's going on with the weather situation. We'll stay on the call in case there's any questions. We might be there at a press conference also talking with other officials. We might also issue a flash flood watch. So a watch means that the conditions are favorable for it occurring, but our confidence isn't quite high. So we might only be about 50% confident that far out. So a watch is sort of the, hey, we're getting your attention. We have a situation here that could produce debris flows. If you remember back our most recent rain that we had, we did not have a flash flood watch. We considered it. We looked very closely at the situation. We did have, on that second day, we had some heavier rain down in the city, which, by the way, was actually below this coming year's thresholds. But that was a situation we looked at that we felt that did not need a flash flood watch. So if you go on to the next bullet, so the storm is ongoing, or it's very imminent. Say it's within just a day or so or half a day. We're participating in the storm risk meetings. We may issue a flash flood warning, especially if it's ongoing. Debris flows are very difficult to forecast. And so there may be times in which a warning is issued when we actually hear the first report of a debris flow. It's unfortunate. We call it lead time. It's unfortunate that it may be a 0-minute lead time. We're lucky in some situations that, especially if we have these organized storms that move over rain gauges, give us the data, we're actually able to get a flash flood warning out as much as an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours in advance, okay? But a flash flood warning means that it's either happening or it's imminent. Okay? And then we also may issue what's called a flood advisory. And that won't activate your phones, it won't activate EAS, but you will likely hear it from the media that we've issued a flood advisory for the Santa Barbara South Coast. This means that the rainfall is not expected to be very heavy, but we may have some nuisance flooding, not considered to be life-threatening or property damaging. So kind of nuisance you may have for up here, you may have some small debris that moves across the road but not life-threatening. So after the storm cleanup, we may be participating in some of the team calls, some of the operations calls. We may also have on-site deployments. So that's where a meteorologist from our office is actually there at the incident command post providing direct support for the incident commanders at that incident command post. So that's also an important part that could occur on the day of the storm or even on the cleanup efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Kevin Taylor, Division Chief for Operations, Montecito Fire. And now we don't have Kevin Taylor. We have Rob Lewin. You don't look like Kevin Taylor. So, I don't know what's going on here, but Rob's going to talk next.
Thanks, boss. We changed it up, and we didn't tell him because we thought it would be funny. It's good to be with all of you again. It's good to be with you on a blue sky day. Part of our mission is to prepare communities. That's what we do every day under blue sky conditions, and that's why we're here. And we are confident that all of us together in this room, we're going to get through this winter in the very best way that we can. And we're glad that you feel strong about being prepared, and I want to assure you that we do too. We have met all summer long, all of the organizations that you see that are in this room. We have not let down our guard for a moment in preparation for today so that we could provide you with the lessons that we have learned through the winter. You can change the slide here. I want to start off where Mark Jackson from the Oxnard Weather Office led off. He talked about setting us up for telling us that there is something coming that could be harmful, a storm that could be. When he tells us there's just a storm that could be a problem, we convene the storm risk team. This is members of the people in this room from the different organizations. It's an interagency group that collectively makes a decision about what actions we want the public to take. We abide by certain principles in our decisions to make evacuations. We abide by the principle that we will evacuate when necessary, when it means protecting the community. We will not hesitate in doing that. We will evacuate for the shortest amount of time. We will get you out only when necessary, and we will get you back home as soon as we can. And we also abide by the principle that we will give you all the information that we have, that everything that we know, we will make sure that you know and can get. So, once we get to that place where there's a storm that has the potential to cause harm, we're going to pass on the weather advisories that we get from the National Weather Service. This is the time where we want you to be ready, where you've taken note of how Wildland Fire has been for over a dozen years preparing the community in their Ready, Set, Go program. We've lifted that concept and we're applying it to storms. And so in this case, once we send out an advisory, and this will be sometime between 72 and 48 hours, that there's a storm that may or may not have the potential to cause harm, we're going to send out that advisory. You need to start thinking about what you're going to do. Is your home ready? Have you done everything to protect your home? Are your gutters cleaned out, or do you have sandbags if you need them? Is there anything that could be mobilized within your own yard? Do you know where all of your family members are, how to get hold of them quickly? Those kinds of things. Then between 48 and 24 hours for a storm that is easy for the National Weather Service to see, such as an atmospheric river, some kind of storm that's setting up, we're going to, if they say that, yes, the storm looks like it's going to be a problem, we're going to issue an evacuation warning. This is that time where you need to get set. This is the time where you need to prepare to leave. Everything is ready. You know where you're going to go when you have to leave. You know what things you're going to bring with you when you have to leave. You know where you're going to meet up with people if you're in different locations. You're going to know where your go bag is and the things that are in it that you need, your medications, your extra batteries, any supplies, any documents, any photos, all the things that you're going to want to have. That means you're going to get set. That's what happens during that period. And then finally, between 24 hours and up to the storm, if need be, if the storm is predicted to meet the thresholds and could require your action, we're going to issue an evacuation order. The evacuation order means go, and it means go now. It doesn't mean to get set, it means to go now. And that is what you need to do. And so when you have to make this moment to go, we want you to do that safely and calmly. And so by following these steps along the way, you will be prepared for this winter. Now, can you give the next slide? We've put together a brochure, both in English and Spanish. We'd like you all to make sure you have this, and that this is the reference document for you. It's simple. It's ready, set, go. There will be issued evacuation warnings, and then when we need you to go, an evacuation order. So make sure you take those with you. Change the next slide. So we have another kind of storm we want to talk to you about that Jackson was referring to. And these are the rapidly developing storms. These are the ones that don't give us 3 days notice. These are the ones that come upon us quickly. And so we want to give you some information on how to be prepared for those. These storms can, as an example, in January of 2017, on the Sherpa burn area, this was a storm that only gave us about 45 minutes of warning for us to issue a warning. That may not be enough time for you to leave, because leaving could put you in harm's way by getting you on a road that could be impacted. So if you are in a position where a storm has come upon us, a rapidly developing one, and you need to know what you're going to do, so here's some steps for you. Tomorrow, while we still have blue skies, and if you identify on the risk map as an area that could be in harm's way during a debris flow, we want you to see if you can get to a neighbor's house that's nearby without driving. That you could just, within seconds, go up the hill to this neighbor's house. And if that is the case, then we want you to go talk to your neighbor about that occurring. And in order to do that, of course, you're going to need shoes and a coat and a flashlight. So we want to make sure you have those ready. Put a cabinet by your front door. Be ready for all of that. Now, what happens if you're in an area that doesn't have a safe ground to go to like that, but you have a second floor? That could be your safe refuge. So think about and talk to your family about, in the event of a debris flow, we're going to go upstairs. And then lastly, if you're in a single-story home and you can't get to a neighbor quickly, then you want to find that room in your house that is most armored. It's protected by the rest of the house. Maybe it's in the center of the house. And so think about that and have a plan. And if you have any questions about that, we want you to reach out to your fire department or to us or to the sheriff's office, and we are glad to come and give you some guidance on those steps. Now, if you want, I can just turn it. It's Kevin next.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The good-looking one.
All right, good evening. Thanks everybody for being here. Kevin Taylor with Montecito Fire. Now that we've learned from Mark that we're still at risk from these high-intensity, short-duration rainstorms, and Rob has covered our ready, set, go, or weather advisory, evacuation warning, evacuation order process, I'm going to talk a little bit about the interactive map. So next slide, please, Nancy. We stood before you in this room last March and said that over the summer we would take a focused look at the map that we utilized to identify debris flow risk last year. And I'm happy to tell you that over the summer, operational folks from the fire departments, the sheriff's office, the search and rescue, and county flood control all got together and did just that. We evaluated the existing debris flow areas at the parcel level utilizing high-resolution aerial data. If a habitable structure was identified inside the debris flow risk area, that property was put into the evacuation order or considered at risk for debris flow. However, if the property in that debris flow risk area did not have a habitable structure in the projected debris flow footprint, it was removed from the debris flow hazard. This is in alignment with our evacuation principles that include evacuating only those community members that we believe to be at risk. You can go to the next slide, please. Now, if you recall, this map was initially developed shortly after the 1/9 event, utilizing the best science available from the best debris flow scientists from all over the United States. It has one fault, though, and that is that the debris flow basins and the creek channels were all full with debris, and that since has been removed. So to that end, the County of Santa Barbara, with the help of FEMA, has engaged a science engineering firm to construct a new map, and we expect to receive that document towards the end of November. We'll be analyzing that and releasing it to the community in the beginning of December in a meeting very similar to this. But since we had that storm just a month ago, we feel it's important to move forward between now and then with this product that we have available. There's one other thing to note on the new map before we look at it live on the web, and that is that there are properties that are not highlighted in red, not considered at risk for debris flow, but are at risk for isolation should a debris flow occur. If your property is located in this area and you elect to stay during an evacuation order, please remember that it may be up to 14 days before you're able to leave. And if you are there, it's likely that you won't have water, sewer, gas, electricity, cable, or cellular service. So now with Nancy's help, we're going to do a short demo of the interactive map that's available at readysbc.org. So when you navigate to the home page, if you click on the map icon, it will show you this splash that indicates it's the debris flow risk map. In the top left is an address bar. You can enter your address in the search bar, and we're going to use 1470 East Valley Road. And so it'll take you right to your property. If you click on your parcel, it will show you that you are in the debris flow risk area. If you're not in the debris flow risk area, nothing will pop up. Should there be an evacuation order and you navigate to your property, that pop-up message will be changed to read evacuation order. There are also several different layers available on the on the debris flow risk interactive map on the top left portion. And so that's a pull-down menu, and when you click on those, it activates or deactivates various layers. So Nancy just clicked on the layer that shows the debris flow field from 1.9. So there are laptops available in the lobby. This also works on your smartphone. For after the event, if you would like to look up your property, we'll be happy to help you with that. Also, if you haven't registered for alerts at readysbc.org, we can take care of that as well. I want to leave you with one thought. If at any time this winter you feel unsafe during a rainfall event, then please don't be afraid to leave. You don't have to wait for an emergency alert or a notification. Don't be afraid to take action. Trust your instincts. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we are going to have Susan Salcido come up and talk to us a little bit. I'm not sure that it's in that order, but we're going to try that anyway.
All right, thank you.
All righty.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about schools and the impact that the evacuation orders will have on schools. I also wanted to take a moment to express gratitude on behalf of all of our schools in Santa Barbara County, the teachers, the youth, for continuing to put schools as a priority. As we all recognize, they're a hub for youth and families and community information, so really appreciate that, everybody. Earlier we shared that school officials have been continuing to meet about future plans, and that's absolutely true. And just this week, heads of private schools and superintendent and principals of public schools from the Carpinteria area, from Montecito, and from Santa Barbara met regarding all of the information that was shared today, specifically regarding schools and closures should an evacuation order be issued. And I would like to take a moment, because we have many of our heads of schools and our superintendent principals here, to have them stand and introduce themselves. So one, you know who they are, many of you know. 2, we can give them a little bit of recognition. And 3, should you have questions at the end of this event about their specific schools, they'll be glad to share. So I'm going to start with our host tonight, Anthony Rainey. Anyone else? We got everybody. All right. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. No, there was no seating chart, so you're okay. You're fine. Great, thank you. So as we saw the map earlier, you saw some of the areas in red, and you might have seen some areas in yellow. The areas that you saw in yellow are schools when you click on schools in that pull-down menu. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that those schools are in yellow. And so Crane School and Aliso School and Aliso Schools in Carpinteria are actually in red evacuation areas. So of course, if there's an evacuation order issued, then they will evacuate. But other schools are significantly impacted as well, even if they're not in an order area and highlighted in red. It's because they'll be impacted by road closures and isolation. The schools will be closed if an evacuation order is issued. So I want to ensure that you have that listed. They're up here already, but I want to say what they are and give you a little bit more information about them. So the schools that will be closed if an evacuation order is issued is Montecito Union here on San Ysidro, Mount Carmel School around the corner on Hot Springs Road, Laguna Blanca Lower School on San Ysidro, Crane School on San Leandro, and all of the schools in the Carpinteria Unified School District. All of the schools in the Carpinteria Unified District will be closed if an evacuation order is issued. Fortunately, Cold Springs School on Sycamore Canyon is not itself in an evacuation area, nor are its surrounding neighborhoods for the families that feed into Cold Springs School. So fortunately, Cold Spring will remain open if an evacuation order is issued. Alternate sites will remain in place for many of our schools. I have some of them with me tonight, so I'll share those. Montecito Union will again be welcomed by Hope School District in Santa Barbara. Laguna Blanca Lower School will again be welcomed by the Girls Inc. on Hollister in Goleta, and Crane School will go to multiple sites as well. All of our schools have been tremendously impactful and tremendously communicative to their students and their families and their teachers and their staff, and plan to continue to communicate as well as we move further into the winter. So thank you again for your commitment to our schools and to supporting our youth, our teachers, our staff, and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate the information. Next up, I'm positive that it's going to be Craig Bonner, our newest Chief Deputy with the County of Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office.
All right, so on behalf of Sheriff Brown and our entire Sheriff's Office team, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and participating in this opportunity. It's an opportunity to work on protecting yourselves, protecting your family, and protecting our community. So our teams have spent the past 10 months evaluating our capabilities, identifying areas that we need to make improvements in, refining policies, procedures, and training to ensure that we are better able to prepare for and respond to incidents that impact our local communities here. One of the key areas that we addressed throughout this process was the manner and methods by which we conduct evacuations, and just as importantly, the methods that we're going to utilize to communicate with you, our community members, about the need for evacuations. So the folks that have gone before me tonight, they've explained the refinement of the evacuation map, the adoption of the Ready, Set, Go principles, and I think those are going to hopefully make it much easier to understand as community members what we need to do when the time comes. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the evacuation process and how we are going to connect with community members that need to evacuate. So Lewin talked about the decision team that is made up of stakeholders as well as subject matter experts that is convened to evaluate whether or not we need to conduct an evacuation and provide guidance to the sheriff. From that, the sheriff makes a decision as to whether or not we're going to make the evacuation. And in that decision, we're going to utilize those 6 principles that Mr. Lewin talked about, you know, ensuring public safety, evacuating only when necessary, etc. Then there's the question of how we are going to notify the community about the evacuations. There are several key means by which the Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with Santa Barbara County OEM and our other public safety partners, are going to communicate with our community members about those evacuations. So once it becomes apparent that evacuations may be needed, we're going to begin pushing information out to the community. When possible, we're going to start doing this with the traditional media and disseminating information through like the 211 line, the Santa Barbara County TV channel, SBC TV, and that's that in that get ready stage where we want you to start thinking about what needs to occur. Similarly, we're going to push information out via social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and Nixle. The one key thing, and they brought it up here, whether through Ready, the Ready SBC, but is those aware and prepare alerts. That is one of the key methods that we're going to use to push information. We'll talk about the wireless emergency alerts in just a second, but the nice thing about the aware and prepare alerts is that we can give you more information about what you need to do. But for the most part, you have to sign up to get those aware and prepare report or alerts. And we've got people here set up in the back to help you, A, either get signed up, or B, to make sure that you are signed up. So those aware and prepare alerts also include robocalls, where you'll get information on your cell phones and or on your landlines, text messages, emails. We can give you pretty good information about what's going on, what you need to do, and when you need to do it with those. So then we move on to when it's time to go. The evacuation order has been given. We're going to use the wireless emergency alert, or WEA, system. It's not a foolproof system. It was tested just a few weeks ago, and some people, including Mr. Lewin, didn't get it on one of his phones. So that's why it's important that you don't rely upon the WEA, but that you have the aware and prepare alerts set up. So the WEA will send it out. We're only able to put in 90 characters. That's not a whole heck of a lot of information. So, you know, if you get that WEA alert, it's not going to tell you exactly what you need to do. It's going to give you that there's a problem and that you need to get your head on a swivel and start paying attention to other sources of information so that you know what to do. Just to give you an example, in the case of a storm that doesn't give us an opportunity to push information out, that 90-character WEA might be as simple as saying, rainfall is occurring in the Montecito area, flash flood alert, take action to stay safe. That's like 89 characters. There's no more information that we can put into that. So as quickly as possible, we're going to follow up that WEA with the aware and prepare alerts, which, again, emails, texts, robocalls, that will provide additional information as to what we need you guys to do. We also plan to utilize the FCC emergency alert system, TVs and radios, and I don't know if we've got the Radio Ready program. So that's a fairly new thing that we're doing here. We have many stations in the Santa Barbara area, radio stations, that have backup generator power, and they've been provided with satellite phones with which we can communicate with them. Now, again, you can put batteries into a radio, they're able to transmit, and you can get that even when the cell phone systems go down or the landline systems go down. You can still get that because they're transmitting and you've got a receiver in an old school radio with batteries in it. So finally, when it comes right down to it, whenever it's feasible to do so, we in the sheriff's office intend to use door-to-door notifications to effect evacuations. We will have our deputies and our search and rescue team out in the affected neighborhoods, knocking on doors and making loudspeaker announcements. So I know one of the evacuation-related discussion items that's came up a number of times, and it kind of ties in with some of the discussion about being prepared to be out for an extended period of time. But in the wake of the Thomas fire and the 1-9 debris flow, it came up as the question of the ability of the sheriff's office and the other public safety partners to escort community members to and from their properties to retrieve belongings. So as the duration of an evacuation progresses, we are constantly evaluating the safety of everyone involved, the security concerns, the operational impacts, and the availability of resources to accomplish those escorts in making that decision as to whether or not we can do it. The key message is that when community members are preparing to evacuate their homes, that they should not count on the ability of escorts to be present for at least a few days, maybe even weeks, depending on how bad the situation is. As others have said earlier, our community members need to make every effort to be prepared and not be prepared to not have access to their homes for an extended period of time. And just kind of closing things out, I want to reiterate that the organizations and the people that you've seen up here, they've done an absolutely great job, an awesome job at preparing and getting us and our communities better ready to deal with the future that's coming our way. So.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. I'm going to have Rob Lewin come back up, and we've got a couple slides up here. Chief Deputy Bonner talked a little bit about the radio programs, and we have on our screen behind me here some of the radio stations that are part of the Radio Ready program, so that in the event of an emergency, we can push some programming over to those. You want to come up and talk a little bit about that, Rob?
Thank you. So very quickly, if we have a catastrophic failure of our communication system, such as our aware and prepare alerting and our ability to use our cell phones, and we've lost our cell towers, those kinds of things, we have a redundant system built in, which is a Radio Ready program. It's been around for many years. However, we've rebooted it this year through great work. These radio stations above have all agreed to participate in it. Others will as well, but these are all the ones that are guaranteed to be able to communicate with us via satellite telephone. So when we lose all other communication methods, we should still have satellite, and we'll provide them with information to convey to all of you. They all have backup generator systems, and they all have people that can be deployed as on-scene dispatcher, disc jockeys, if you will, at the radio stations. I also, if you don't mind for a second, I saw that Yoli McGlinchey from the Santa Barbara City, can you just raise your hand, Yoli? Oh, I'm sorry. Joined us here as well, and thanks, Yoli, for coming. We're glad the city's a partner with us on this whole thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. So we're getting ready to go into the question and answer portion of this. I just want to make sure that if you have questions, we've got a lot of folks here. You've heard from some of the speakers here. We've got Chief Deputy Bonner. We've got Kevin Taylor from the Montecito Fire Department here. We've got Susan Salcido from the Superintendent of Schools Office, Rob Lewin, our Director of Emergency Management. As Rob pointed out, we have Yoli here from the City of Santa Barbara to help us out tonight. We also have John Fry from our flood control out in the audience, and Cindy Ponce. It's a hard name to pronounce that way. Cindy Ponce with CHP here with us tonight. And I see also in the crowd that we have James Joyce from Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson's office, and Julia Diamond from Congressman Carbajal's office here in the crowd. If you could put a hand up. There she is. So with that, let's go into some questions and answers. If you wouldn't mind making your way to the microphone, one side or the other, and we can get you lined up with the right person to answer questions. Yeah.
So, can you hear me? Okay, so I don't want to break it. I'm like a bull in a china shop. So I think most of us really appreciate the new information that came out this morning with the map, and this is probably a question for you, Rob. The map feels like it's putting a bright line on the evacuation. I think some of us have a little anxiety about that because of what happened that night with mandatory evacuations and voluntary evacuations and the feeling of that line as well. And I think my main question is maybe you could describe, if we do reach the thresholds, what does this look like? And then also sort of the secondary question to that is that I just heard that for everybody that's outside of that area, that they won't be told to evacuate. So, but be ready, you thousands of people, to sit there for 14 days without power and gas. So if you could kind of address that, because that seems like a tough, it's a mixed message that I think needs to be clarified.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity for that question. And Nancy, could you pull up the map for us and kind of pull out just to show the Montecito area in general? And if you could turn on the debris field from the 1-9 debris, and I'll kind of explain. So in fact, the red line is a bright line. It is the area that is going to be in an evacuation order. When the scientists made this map last January, they did it with the highest potential of a repeat kind of storm, a repeat kind of debris flow. A level 7 is what they would refer to that debris flow as occurring. We're confident that that science is good, and we also believe that when we get the analysis completed that's underway by the consultant firm that's doing the work, that we're hopeful that even that line may get smaller. Those lines could shrink. Some people may in fact get added to it, but we think the science is solid for what we're showing you right now, and we want you to believe in that. Now that said, there's 2 points to make. One, the areas, as you all know from the 1-9 debris flow that were in between the channels, you were isolated in some cases. And in many cases, operational folks came in and rescued you, drove you out in high clearance vehicles, maybe in helicopters were used. The operations folks are committed to undertaking that kind of an operation again as soon as they're done doing live rescues and moving into those in the second priority, which of course would be trying to get everyone into a protected area. So what does that mean? It means if you're in one of those areas that was isolated, that's in between channels, that you do need to be prepared for an extended amount of days that you will have to be self-sufficient. It doesn't mean that you're in harm's way, though. It doesn't mean that you have to worry about a debris flow in between those channels. The areas that have to worry about a debris flow are those red areas on the map. That said, again, if you are a person that has special needs, you have access and functional needs, you have you don't want to be isolated, and you see the rest of the community is being put into an evacuation order, this is your opportunity to say, I'm just going to leave on my own. Ultimately, and you'll see this on top of the flyer that we've handed out to all of you, it says if at any time that you feel threatened, you should take the initiative and leave. You just do that. We are abiding by the principle of only evacuating people that it's necessary to keep out of harm's way. So that's why we're going with this plan. I hope that clarified. Go ahead. I'm good? Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. Next.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. My name is Marcus Lopez, Old Spanish Town, here in Montecito. And I noticed that the CHP is not here and Los Padres is not here. Oh, Los Padres here. Well, CHP's here. Thank you very much. Because at 1-9, they were very helpful. And one question I had is that you didn't mention anything about the bridge which is being built right now in East Valley by Perro Grande, but other bridges, number one, how are they going? Other bridges, and I know that night, that 1-9, that night, we seen that all the roads were blocked, all the roads were closed. That was number one. If we know that already, what are the different particular offices and departments going to do in order to see which are going to be, are they going to have prioritized? For example, like in the last 1-9, Santa Cedar was open. And so luckily, all the people they evacuated as far as besides helicopter and whatnot, they went down to the church down here, which really I really appreciated because my sister was one of them. And you didn't comment on that. What's your view on that? And then second of all, what's your strategy as far as if this next particular storm, hopefully it's not as it's not a perfect storm. What is the strategy? And second of all, Los Padres is not here, but yet how does the mountains look like? How do they look like now? What's the growth rate? And at the same time, on the prevention or the view of certain areas that are susceptible to boulders and to heavy rock versus other areas, because I know that just from observation, the creek and years of living here, that the first flow, that's the main, that's the mother lode. But the other flow, what's your view on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So for parts of this question, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Taylor, Montecito Fire.
Thanks very much for the question. I'll try to take the operational ones that you asked. So we work very closely with the Los Padres Bear team, and they're telling us that the regrowth is at between 25 and 30%. That's been factored into the new debris flow threshold rainfall amounts, and so that's why we were comfortable moving to year 2. For your questions on the plan for where we'll direct people or where we stage resources should there be in another event similar to 1-9, we have operational plans and maps that run from the Whittier Fire Scar to Highway 150. Those identify where we'll pre-position our rescue resources, high water vehicles, helicopters, and medical resources. Should the event occur, there are pre-identified casualty collection stations that we will move people to and safe refuge areas that we then evacuate them out of the area from. So I hope that that answers your questions.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello. I have a bit of information to share and a question from that information. I'm Charles Newman and one of the planning commissioners for Montecito. At our last meeting, Caltrans District 5 came before us and made a presentation about the 101. And the question was asked, which was an important one, what will be the status of our bridges and will they be available in the case of an evacuation? And the answer back from Caltrans in an email just received yesterday is the following. Any bridge that is structurally transversible will be open for evacuation purposes, and the construction crews and Caltrans are coordinating with law enforcement. They may not have all the side rails or whatever, but if the bridge can be traversed, it will be open and available. So that's an important bit of news, I think, to share with the community. I think the question to our first responders in county is, how will people know which bridges are traversable in the event of an evacuation? How will that specific bit of information be communicated?
Thank you, Charles. If I could get CHP Ponce up here to help us out with answering that question for the record.
So that information will be through social media, press releases, through our department in Caltrans to let you know which bridges are available to traverse through during an evacuation. And I can give you an update on the bridges. Currently, The Romero Creek Bridge is scheduled to be open with some restrictions this fall, so hopefully by the end of November. And then Montecito Creek Bridge is expected to be reopened to traffic with also some restrictions this winter, which winter could be January, hopefully. San Ysidro Creek is scheduled to be completed this fall and reopened to traffic also. Toro Creek Bridge is estimated to continue construction through the winter, and sometime in early February we should have that back open. Olive Mill is still under construction. The railing is being redone. Arroyo Paradon is expected to open this winter. So looks like fall and winter, with the latest one being early February to be reopened for all those bridges. But if we do have an evacuation, we will, if they're traversable and can hold traffic, we will get that information out to you and we will allow you to evacuate on those routes. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And we just want to give a quick shout out to Caltrans, who, to get that many bridges done in this amount of time is just miraculous. It's almost unbelievable. So we really appreciate all their hard work and their efforts, and that was some good news. So thank you for that, and thank you for the question, Charles. Appreciate it. Next question.
You've already stated this, I missed part of the meeting. The debris flow was considered part of the Thomas Fire event as far as insurance purposes went. Do you know if that will continue on for this year as well and subsequent years?
So thank you for the question. Rob, you want to answer that question from an Office of Emergency Management? Or repeat the question? Oh. James Joyce is here from the Senator's office, and he's looking forward to answering this one. He's got a big smile on his face. He's ready to go.
So this is not the first time that we've received this question, and pretty much what we've been told by the Department of Insurance is it's going to be a case-by-case basis. The law that the Senator passed does basically outline the efficient proximate cause, and that's going to be pretty much the determining factor of what they're going to use, but it's going to have to be figured out on a case-by-case basis, largely because what we've seen here with the maps, the lay of the land has changed. It's a different circumstance now, and so there will be a case-by-case basis. If any folks have additional questions on that, feel free to call our office. We can help you interface with the Department of Insurance on that. That's what I understand is that, yes. The fact that it's the question was that does it mean that neighbors who have different insurance companies could have different outcomes of their request? And the answer to that is yes, potentially.
Do you happen to know if it would be a blanket coverage for evacuation, lodging, et cetera, or is that going to be case by case?
Not sure on that, but we could talk offline in the back after that one. I'm not sure. The question is, does the Department of Insurance have a philosophy on whether the subsequent debris flows should be tied to the Thomas Fire? Is that correct? They have the philosophy in accordance with the state law that the efficient proximate cause, beyond that, I'm not sure about a philosophy, but there is that law that says that if the debris flow is as a result of the fire, that it should be covered.
Thank you, James. We appreciate that answer. And as with other things, if you have other questions, you can certainly email them to us, and we will do our best to try and answer those. Other questions? Oh, yep. Got one here. We got one, a couple? Okay.
On your ready, set, go
What do you want, weather or you? Yeah. Want to repeat the
So the question was, if a storm's coming in at 48 hours, we're issuing an evacuation warning, and then it makes a hard right or a hard left, and it's no longer a threat, we will issue a follow-up immediately as soon as we have that information, a notice to all of you using all of our methods to say that no action will be required, and we'll either keep it at an evacuation warning level or we'll reduce it all the way. So we are ready to turn off any evacuation that's in process if things change with the weather service. And just to that end, I want you to know that the storm risk team did in the past and will again this winter, will meet as often as necessary. We already schedule a time on our calendars every day. It's on all of our calendars right now that at this hour we will block out and not hold meetings to make sure that we can all convene. But we've also convened at different times as well to help make those decisions.
Thanks, Rob. Another question over here.
Hi. My question is, what kind of information can we expect on the radios? During the 9/1, I actually had a radio, and I was listening, and there was no information as to what to do. And I was in an area that I was in between channels, and we didn't know what to do. So do we expect the same collection areas that we had versus, for instance, Burnham Wood and the helicopters? Do we know that that's going to be, should another event happen, a collection point for us? Or is there going to be information as to what to do? Because there wasn't this last time. I couldn't find any information.
That's a good question. I'm going to turn this one over to Rob, and we can talk a little bit about last year and this year.
Yeah, so again, another great question. The question, one of the lessons we have learned is that our Radio Ready program needed to be improved. And so we have quarterly tests now with all these radio stations that we referred to earlier. And the idea here now is in our Joint Information Center, once it is operating, so if we have one of these rapidly developing storms that we aren't even activated in our Emergency Operations Center and our Joint Information Center, that storm, we're not going to give you information over the radio immediately. We're going to be using our other alerting systems. However, once we have our Joint Information Center open, we are going to be in communication with those radio stations and providing them with information to convey over those AM and FM stations in a better way than we did last year. Is that the...
But will that information tell us where we can go for help? Because there was no information. We had no internet. We had no way of getting information. So I was listening to the radio gave us nothing. So will the radio tell us, you know what, if you can get to Burnwood, go to Burnwood. If you can get to Alton, go to Alton. Will it include that kind of information?
I'm gonna take everything you just said.
Not to interrupt her, but I think right on. Thank you very much. It seems I got more information from the CHP officer that was on the street stuck with us during that night than I did anybody else. You all been needing to communicate with one another. You know, for whatever reason, it wasn't clear what was going on. The radio was low priority. And I think you need to up it, work together. I got more news from the CHP and from the fire department than I did anything else because they were on the ground level. And I think I know you don't want to get false information out, but thank you very much because that was really a sore spot. I'm going, what's going on here? So maybe some response. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate both of your comments. I mean, we're going to, of course, take this back with us to and follow up to make sure that the systems that we think we have in place are solid. And some of it, what I'm hearing, is that we can solve that by making sure that our incident command folks are communicating with our Emergency Operations Center to provide the information to our Joint Information Center, which is co-located with us at the Emergency Operations Center. So we'll make that commitment that we're prepared to do exactly what you're all conveying to us. We want you to have the information. I also don't want you to not communicate with officers on the ground. People on the ground, they're getting information back and forth, and so that is not a bad way to communicate. Neighbor to neighbor information, of course you need to make sure it's real information, but as we want people to communicate with each other as well. And in the first few hours of any emergency, It's always going to be necessary for you to take action, for you to take responsibility for your safety and your family's safety. And we are doing everything we can to put together all the plans to get in there and help all of you along the way. And clearly, even in this modern age where we have all this technology, the old reliable information that can come over an AM/FM radio and the information that can come from door-to-door knocks by law enforcement officers is still some of the best way that we can provide information, and we realize that. So we're going to follow up on everything you've conveyed, both of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I have a related question, and maybe this is for the Weather Service. The communication gap was something that concerned me, so I bought a police scanner, and I've found a way to teach myself how to use it, and I'm listening to it, and I'm learning the rhythms of what's a busy night and what's a normal night, and there's the weird robo-weather message that I've learned that comes through. Is that from you? And is there some way that we could get like a specialized weather alert instead of just the kind of creepy lady random weather alert? You know, like maybe one that sounds like Sean Connery, perhaps.
So I believe on your scanner, you ran into the NOAA weather radio frequency. Is that correct? Yeah. That's it. So I didn't bring up the NOAA weather radio, but I will now. So we have a 24/7 broadcast, and we used to actually manually record these, but now we have, I think we call him Sven. He's a robo, but it's a recorded forecast. It's a cycle of that forecast, of any other information. If we have a flash flood watch in effect, you will be able to hear that flash flood watch and the description of everything. If we issue a flash flood warning that activates the emergency alert system, that radio will then be obnoxiously loud for this area. I can't speak for sure about the reception up here in Montecito. Does anybody have a NOAA weather radio that's here? NOAA weather radio? Anybody have one? So I can't. The problem is, do you have one? Do you get reception of? We have broadcast peak. There's a transmitter on broadcast peak. So I don't want to oversell it, because you may live in an area where you turn it on and you don't have reception. That's the only problem. Where you lived, obviously you do. But I encourage you to, they're at any electronics store, go to Fry's, Best Buy, and they have NOAA weather radios. You can program for your area so that when you there's a code that's included in that warning that goes out that will specifically alert you. Hopefully you'll also get your wireless emergency alert. I know there were some issues before, but hopefully you'll also get that. But it's another great way to, again, as long as you have power, well, you don't even need power. They have no weather radio that you can crank. So you don't even have to plug in. You crank it up and you'll be able to listen to it.
And that's NOAA.
Yeah, I'm sorry, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And NOAA does not stand for the National Organization for the Advancement of Acronyms, unlike some people think. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Quick question on the bridges that will be open for evacuations. There's a temporary bridge on Ashley Road that crosses Cold Springs, and it's intact and complete. It just fenced off for emergency vehicles only. And we talked to the fire department about opening it up for red flag days. Can we open that up for evacuations in the winter as well?
So I'm going to turn that question over to Kevin Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's the same process that we utilize during the red flag warnings. So it's assigned to one of our staff members to actually go down and open it in that particular case.
Great, thank you.
That's good news, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, I was very involved or interested in radio where there was no communication. That was like right after the event at meetings. My question was, can we have some test radio things that go on so that we could be notified to do a test with our radio and have something to know that that's working?
We sure can.
And the other thing was that I remember a few years ago the fire department was issuing some kind of a radio. And I wonder if we could get those back so that people could purchase them here or get them if they're working, if that's a better way of trying to get communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
They stopped doing those radios, and I don't know why.
So, Kevin, you want to speak to that? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. After the T-fire, one of the communication methods that was set up was that special radio that issued a notification to Montecito community members in the absence of any other notification. Unfortunately, the company that we purchased those from and that ran the system went out of business, and there is no other new system like that that we can replace it with. So while we continue to search for other innovative notification methods in addition to all that you saw when Craig presented, we have not been successful in locating a similar device.
Officer Ponce or Mr. Lewin, I have a question for you about the status of Highway 101 and what the status of Highway 101 would be during the Ready, Set, Go. If I recall at a meeting here in February or March, there was discussion that Highway 101 would be shut down during a potential debris flow or storm event.
Yes. To answer your question, we will keep the 101 open until we have any indication that there is some sort of debris flow that will shut it down. We didn't have a grasp on what to expect in upcoming storms because of what we experienced on the 1-9 debris flow. So having experienced storms since then, we have been able to keep the 101 open the entire time, and that is our plan, to keep it open until it's absolutely necessary to close it for public safety. That was during the Thomas fire, and that was because we had the overturned tanker truck at Turnpike on the northbound 101, and we were evacuating the Riviera. So that was a decision that was made to allow for everyone to evacuate out of the Riviera during the fire and keep the LA Basin traffic out of the area. So that's why that was closed, due to the fact that we had a closure already due to the overturned tanker truck on the 101. No, because we'd have enough time for everybody to evacuate. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions.
I just...
There you go, Matt's back.
Yeah, sorry. I got a text message from somebody watching it. They wanted me to clarify. Rob, if you could clarify, if you are not in the red area, and there's an evacuation, will there be a voluntary evacuation given to people not in the red area?
The answer, I want to be super clear here, and no one should leave until we have everyone understanding this. So thank you again. The only types of evacuations that we're going to be issuing is an evacuation warning, which is a preparatory step for you to be set to go. When you're set to go, and then if in fact something develops, a rapidly developing storm occurs, you're set to go, then of course we want you to take action on your own and not wait for us to have you go. But the people that have to go, that are going to be ordered to go, are in the red area only. The areas between that were yellow last year are areas that could be isolated, but we want you to treat that like you would treat all emergency moments. In other words, we could have an earthquake tomorrow. That means that you're also isolated and you need to be able to take care of yourself for an extended period of time. The reason we arrived at this, that there's no more yellow area, is because we are trying to abide by this principle of not evacuating people that don't need to evacuate. We felt, but we still want you to understand that there's a good chance you're going to be isolated. And so if you are one of those people that needs to leave for whatever particular reason, then we encourage you to take that action and leave. You're going to all be notified. Let me say this way. Everybody will be notified from the county line all the way through Montecito that people are being evacuated in the risk areas. So you'll have knowledge of what's going on. So everyone will have that. We will not just message the people in the risk areas. Sir?
And I'll just remind you, Matt, that we should be clear. If people are not going to be prepared to stay put for up to 14 days and they're surrounded by 2 red areas, they should evacuate.
And it's probably
On the mic. On the mic.
The insurance may not cover your costs, right? You can repeat the question.
That's right. The clarification is, if you are not in a red zone, depending on your insurance, they might not cover it. Of course, you know, the other side is evacuating too many people, and we want to prioritize the areas that need to be evacuated. I also just want to make a note, the first Tuesday in November, we're going to have alerting item at the Board of Supervisors, and since we're running down in questions, I just want to, you know, thank you for hanging in there for this whole meeting, for working to prepare our community. I hope you help disseminate this information because I think the most inspirational part of this darkness in the last year has been how much the community pulls together. And so we need your help to help pull the community together and be ready for this winter. Oh, and there will be another one of these meetings in Carpinteria on Monday.
I just want to make the note that as a parent of a student in one of the schools in the districts that will be, or in one of the schools that will be evacuated, there's a potential with the new map that there will be hundreds of families who will not be asked to evacuate, and yet they will be asked to take their kids to school across town in the middle of potentially a storm. So I think it would be really great to consider that because that could potentially be a whole different danger of asking families to get their kids from a very rainy day, even if they are not themselves in danger from where they live, but having them go through the streets and get across town to a different part of town and back.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, and I know that you didn't ask a question with it, and you were stating your concern, but I just say that because as the school officials have met, we have talked about multiple scenarios also. There are scenarios that, as we discussed today, there might be a rapidly approaching storm that we just haven't had all those days of warnings ahead, and what we want to do is give our families as much notification as possible, always. And I know that there are teachers that come in from multiple places, families that have to go across town. It affects so many different layers. And as I was saying earlier, the impact of schools, the concentric circles that it affects is so wide that we definitely have as a continued priority to notify our communities and give you as much opportunity to get your students and evacuate your homes as possible.
The Creek Live View cameras, will they be up and running?
One second. I want to just teach some things about the map on schools. Nancy, if you could zoom in on the schools in the center there. What we've done is when you click on, say, Montecito Union School right there, that one, no, up above, no, okay, that one's fine. You see it says school, okay, it says school will close during a debris flow evacuation. Now, neither of those schools were in an evacuation risk area, but the school, all of the leadership from the schools met, and the decision is that because of what you're saying, that parents going and driving to and from school, if they're not evacuated to a school, is not also a safe thing to do. So that's why, so this map gives a little information. Now, if we go over to Cold Spring School off to the west, right there, you can see that this one does not say that it will close during school. So the map is going to be helpful for you to understand the status of your school.
But the point is, for example, Montecito Union will be closed, but school will be open at a different location, for example, in the Hope District for this school. So if a family is not evacuating because they're here in Montecito, they have to get their kids to the Hope School because school's not. This particular location is closed. The school is still open to them actually. So no matter how much warning we have, there's still the fact that we have to get our kids from Montecito to the Hope District during the rain event, for example.
Right. Yes, I think I do. I think it would be, I'm going to pass that. I think that's a school discussion with, your your principals and superintendents on that sort of detail about how that'll be with the school being relocated and how you can.
But there'll be possibly hundreds of families impacted, just so you know, that are not evacuated.
Right. I mean, we all understand the impacts for sure. Thank you.
Okay. The live view cameras that are in the, or were in the creeks, will they be up and running again so that we can actually see what's going on there and get a little heads up? I know they went down with the flood, but are they being restored?
So thanks for the question. I'm looking at John Fry with flood control in the back of the room. Do you know the answer to that question?
Was the question, are remote cameras going to be available and accessible to the public? Well, the live view cameras that used to show us the creeks, you could log on and see them. They went down during the reflow. Will they be restored before this? They were. Yeah, they have. And the reason they went down is because they were right. Perfect. Thank you.
So the answer to that question was yes, they will be back up and they will be restored prior to the winter season. Question in the back.
Will we take this to Carpinteria on Monday before that, so that we can answer this question for our constituents? Why did this happen in Montecito and not Carpinteria?
The storm or this meeting? The debris flow? Oh. So I'm going to let Rob answer that question a little bit. Talk a little bit about where the storm fell.
So there's a couple of significant things that made it so that the most destruction was in Montecito, and that is that if you look at the rain totals across the Thomas Fire burn area in Santa Barbara County, in total, the totals are about the same whether the mountains above Carpinteria or the mountains above Montecito. The difference is that there was a band of rain that went above the Montecito canyons all the way up the mountain and dropped an extraordinary amount of, remember the term now, high intensity short duration rain. That high intensity short duration rain was a 200-year event. It was 0.54 inches in 5 minutes. That triggered the debris flow, and it was high intensity that way for 15 minutes. That same event didn't happen to that degree. There was still, I think, a 50-year event that happened above Carpinteria. And in fact, there were debris flows above Carpinteria, but it did not overwhelm the debris basins. The other thing of note in Carpinteria is the Santa Monica debris basin is a debris basin that holds more capacity than all the other debris basins combined. It's a much, much larger debris basin, and that thing was chock full of debris at the conclusion of that storm. So thanks for that question. It's a good one. We'll, of course, when we get to Carpinteria with you on Monday, we'll be glad to talk more about that as well. So.
Just to point out too, Carpinteria Creek, the stream gauge had a flow rate of 15,000 cubic feet per second, which is a very large flow rate. And so, in addition to the Santa Monica Basin, there's also, if you look at the terrain, the topography, it slopes out, go more gradually down towards the coast. But we've got this exceptionally steep slope behind us. So there are a few factors that were involved. But yes, like what Rob said, it was amazing how this heavy band of precipitation just flew through here very quickly and did not spread that kind of rate in a very far distance.
And that is also the reason why the county's priority for capital projects is debris basin work. We have 4 FEMA grants in for either building new or altering existing debris basins to have greater capacity.
Okay. Sir.
Yes. I've got a specific question concerning the Oak Creek drainage area. Could you put your map up there?
Sure thing. Nancy, can you query by that creek? Which side of the, Kevin? Do you have any?
John Fry is not in the room. We need to find him.
Well, I can keep talking.
Oh, please, go ahead. We'll look for our guy.
It helps to have the map because I've got a specific question. but the overall approach may apply to other folks here. My wife and I live in a 70-year-old house on San Isidro Lane. So this debris flow was perhaps not the first rodeo that that old house has been through. And with the help of a couple of heights of sandbags out front, it went through this past one unscathed. There was a rather benign flow of mud on San Isidro Lane. When I got out there the morning of it, maybe 4 inches. But as we all know, San Isidro Road corridor was open the whole time and open to traffic. Now, what I'm looking at, and I see Oak Creek between Montecito Creek drainage on the left and San Isidro Creek drainage on the right. There's Oak Creek in the middle, and our parcel, I'm quite sure, is going to be in the red with sort of minor effects of the 1.9 flow. I'm just wondering how much the history of damage to a house goes into helping to determine on a parcel basis what is red and what is not red.
So that's a good question. I'm going to turn that over to our members of our storm risk team here that worked on that map and can outline again how some of those decisions were made with and without structures on parcels.
Good, thank you for the question, Mr. Boyd. When the scientists evaluated the LIDAR information that was collected in January, they took into account many, many different factors. Some of those were the collector channels above us between the Camino Cielo and your property. Others were things called choke points. And a choke point is somewhere that the debris flow material, as it's coming through the collector, backs up and creates a new stream essentially. So the red areas that you see on the map are what the scientists think are a worst case scenario for the high velocity debris flow like we saw back in January. Like Rob said, we've contracted with a consultant that hopefully is going to refine that data to reflect empty debris flow basins and open channels. But until we have that, this is our best available science, and we're going to go with this until December. So I hope that answers your question.
I didn't realize Chief Taylor was going to answer that question. I know him well.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. And with that, we're going to wrap up. And before we leave, I want to do a special thank you to Joe Black here, who's done some of our translation services, and Nancy Lucetti in the back, working with OEM now on our GIS mapping. And thank you to all of you in the community that came out tonight to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Thank you.